Teal dear, here is a list of videos that I have made on YouTube. Every single one of them a masterstroke of pure genius. And you should absolutely go and watch every single one of them. Now you may be looking at this list and thinking, God damn it, Teal dear, will you stop intellectually filleting yourself and get to the point? Why are we looking at this list of videos? And that is an excellent question. These videos are the only videos of mine that you can see when you switch YouTube to its restricted mode. That's right, out of the 226 videos that I have hosted on my channel, the gods of YouTube have decreed that these 33 are the only ones that an audience should be permitted to view. All hail our new draconian overlords. Okay, so putting aside all of the silliness for a moment here, let's take a serious consideration of this. Why am I looking at these videos? Why am I checking out YouTube's restricted mode compared to its freedom mode? Well, I've been working on something over the past few weeks, looking at the creeping amounts of not necessarily censorship on social media, because it's not true censorship, but the ever-creeping waves of disincentivizing of certain topics and certain areas of discussion and incentivizing of other areas. And obviously this was a part of the research phase for that video. But I personally found this little area here interesting enough to make a video in its own right. Specifically because I want to see if I can actually figure out what it is that YouTube are specifically trying to disincentivize people from talking about. And looking through the videos which are allowed and the videos which are not allowed, I'm coming up kinda blank on it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through the list of all of the videos on my channel, give a very brief overview of what each of those videos are, and then towards the end I'll give some thoughts on what it is that YouTube might be trying to censor and how they might be trying to do it. Because I've done a few little experiments, which I'd like to share with you. And hopefully, someone out there with maybe a little bit more computer knowledge than myself might actually be able to come up with some means of bulk testing this hypothesis. And it would also be really interesting to me to see other YouTubers go through a similar process of this, so we can start comparing notes and seeing if there is any similarity between what has been hidden and what has not. So let's get right on into this, shall we? I'll leave the restricted mode up on one half of the screen so that you can constantly see it, and then on the other half, I'll be looking through the actual list of videos. So first up we have the after hours for the Russian hackers in my vagina video, a video where I chat shit for a few minutes about whether or not hacking into people's sex toys should be considered a crime and whether or not it would have to be a whole new jurisdiction of crime or not. Not allowed on YouTube. After that, there's the pseudoscience of sexist teenage gamers, a video where I go through a study, if you can call it that, which simply asserted a link between video games and sexism when their actual correlation link was about 0.1, which is ridiculously weak. And the link was only established via a single question. Complete and utter feminist sock just pseudoscience, but we're not allowed to debunk that on YouTube. Before that, Russian hackers in my vagina, a video where I talk about the ability to hack wireless sex toys, and how this has opened up a whole new area of security concern over the internet. Not allowed to have that on YouTube. Before that, These Folks Don't Understand History, a look at a piece of racially motivated propaganda, where a bunch of people spread a bunch of lies and revisionist history, basically the typical "we was Kangs" narrative. Can't have that on YouTube. The op-ed about disclosure, influence, and sponsored content, that is allowed on YouTube. It just talks about the ethical considerations required when people put sponsored content online and concerns around native advertisement. Next up is a live stream. Frankly, I'm not really surprised that my live streams wouldn't appear. They can definitely get a little bit more on the adult side of things. But frankly, that's the point of them. It's the once-a-month time where I get to cut loose and actually chat shit about things. Before that was the consensual rape of Nikki Yavino. Talking about false rape allegations, yeah, you can't do that apparently. Things to learn from drunken fish, now that is allowed on YouTube, and that was just looking at the social effects of alcohol on zebrafish. Before that, the livestream which I did with Harmful Opinions, talking about candid sponsorship and the various dramas surrounding that, that one isn't allowed on YouTube. Now, I don't really understand why that one isn't permitted. The monthly live streams being not permitted, and I don't think there is a monthly live stream which is. That makes sense because those ones feature mashup titles which are ridiculous, and could quite easily be caught in word filters or something like that. That one I'm less sure about. Now, there are live streams on my channel which have been permitted through this filter, and I can't work out why. Before that, there was an op-ed, "You didn't say X, therefore bias," talking about people making assumptions of your position when you don't talk about a certain topic, which is frankly ridiculous, but that one's not allowed for some reason. Before that, Judge confirms the pussy pass, looking at a court case where a judge specifically stated he had to convict women as if they were men, because that was the only way he'd actually convict them, and that isn't allowed on YouTube. Before that, monthly livestream not allowed, not surprised. Before that, Peter doesn't understand Warhammer 40,000. Now, that one is weird, because actually, if you listen to the language that I use in that video, it is actually quite offensive. I am openly calling people heretics and things like that. That's very inflammatory language. And yet that hasn't been caught. And that video I find very interesting, because that's the one where it's kind of a parody where I'm playing the role of a space marine, so I've got a very heavy voice modulation on. So it makes me wonder whether that voice modulation effect messed with YouTube's ability to automatically work out the words being said. Before that, the op-ed on loving and hating your enemy. Just basically a string of thoughts and observations about how different groups of people have different attitudes towards in-groups and out-groups. That's not allowed on YouTube for some reason. Before that, Progressive Academic Echo Chambers 2, a video which is nothing but going through a study, looking at political representation in university faculties and how it's causing problems. Can't do that on YouTube, apparently. Before that was a rather interesting one, Hillary Clinton's Final Gambit, which was a little shitposting video showing someone washing a laptop in a sink with a sponge and a load of soap. The implication being that that's what Hillary Clinton was doing 24 hours before Donald Trump became president of the United States, which is obviously a little joking jab about her deleting information off of her private servers before any sort of investigation could be launched. And that one was allowed on YouTube. Before that, live stream I did with Bunny Blackwell looking at a feminist academic paper, The Dildo as a Transformative Political Tool. Since it's talking about dildos and sex, that doesn't really surprise me that that one wouldn't show up. Ditto for the previous one, examining 2016's Me Time, which is all about analytics of a pornography website. I'm not surprised that that one didn't go through. The use of persuasive redefinition, a video where I talk about how the definitions of words can be shifted, in some cases intentionally, owing to political or ideological bias, and it features a rather lengthy reading from a textbook on the subject. That one is allowed on YouTube. Before that, a shitposting video of me voicing over a deer. That's not allowed because YouTube is officially a no fun allowed zone. Before that, again, live stream doesn't surprise me. The pseudoscience of masculine norms and the CMNI. That's another video where I do nothing but read through a feminist academic study and point out the various flaws in it. There's nothing inflammatory, aggressive, or swearing about it, but that's not allowed on YouTube because reasons. Before that, live stream, not surprised. Before that, a response video to Sean and Jen, where I point out that someone didn't bother reading the sources that they try to use in order to point out that I'm wrong, and thus they end up putting their foot in their mouth in a massive way. Can't have that on YouTube, though. Before that, another live stream with Bunny Blackwell talking about black anality, where we read another feminist academic study which was talking about black anality. Again, since it's largely themed around sex, I'm not really surprised about that. Before that, Heil Caffeine, which was a shitposting video, just of a guy dancing with a little caption at the bottom of it. Can't have that, apparently. Just How Dead is Hans Gretel? A video where I analyse the hypothetical caffeine content of a giant beverage container. You can't do that on YouTube, apparently. It's not safe. After Hours, about feminists not understanding snowplowing. That's just a follow-up to the also banned video from Feminists Don't Understand Snowplowing, which looked at the change in Swedish policy around snowplowing to be more gender egalitarian, or whatever they termed it. You can't do that in either of those videos, apparently. Before that, another Sean and Jen response video, where I point out that he's an idiot. Can't do that, apparently. Bad News Bears, the Free Bearing drama, where I point out that Bearing's old artwork was directly lifted from someone else's intellectual copyrighted material. That's not allowed, apparently. Before that, monthly livestream, doesn't surprise me. A Biological Reason Fussy Eaters, a video where I talk about the heritability of food neophobia in children. That one is not allowed on YouTube for some reason. Feminists Don't Understand Snowplowing, covered that already. Before that, an opinion piece about the cycle of oppression inflation, which is just a sort of hypothetical look at the idea that human rights can be seen as a commodity to some degree. You can't have that on YouTube for some reason. Before that, a live stream with Alison Tiemann, which apparently we can't have. Before that, this is another weird one, the birth control jab for men. Another video where I do nothing but read through a medical study and point out what's actually going on in it after there was a ridiculous amount of media misinformation published about it, and a lot of very misleading videos made about it on YouTube as well. But we can't have that on YouTube, apparently. Before that, a shitposting video about Donald Trump winning the election. It's an audio clip from a salt mining documentary with some images over it. That's it, but you can't have that on YouTube. Before that, a response to Angry MGTOW, who decided that I was a feminist because reasons. That's not allowed on YouTube. Before that, a live stream. Not surprised about that because it's the monthly one. Before that, Happy Triggerween. That is nothing but a video of my avatar that I photoshopped some hats onto with some music. Obviously, the joke is about cultural appropriation and the people who get upset by it. But you can't have that on YouTube. Glorious Leg Training Day, another video where I voice over some stupid deer videos. Not allowed! The op-ed about Smugly choosing a gender in court, that's not allowed on YouTube, even though it's basically just a very long-winded question of, are you going to show up as a man or a woman? And then any questions that might raise about the assertion of male privilege as a result. That's not allowed on YouTube. Before that, both of the videos about the hashtag Polished Man campaign isn't allowed on YouTube, but all that is fact-checking an online hashtag campaign, and finding that, rather unsurprisingly, all of their information is really questionable. And in fact, some of their numbers required them to expressly ignore the overwhelming majority of victims of child abuse. That's not allowed on YouTube, though. Before that, one of the few live streams on my channel which actually is allowed, reading an academic paper about STEM syllabi being gendered. I relentlessly disagree with large swathes of that paper, but that one is allowed up for some reason. Before that, we've got both of the videos which I've done about Amazon Echo's Alexa and how it's obviously sexist. Now, the original video talking about it isn't allowed, even though that video is just looking at a few of the articles which claimed that it was sexist, and just points out that, no, your claims are unfounded and completely ridiculous. And in a lot of cases, there's some very compelling scientific evidence as to why these devices use female voices compared to male voices. The original one is not allowed, but the after hours on it is for some reason. Before that, the Meteor Hits Earth Women Most Affected. Both of those are allowed up, but those videos are only talking about rates of lung cancer, and a charity or organization or whatever it was trying to claim that women are the ones who are basically more affected than men, even though objective evidence shows otherwise. Now that one is allowed for some reason. Before that, a little joke video about the Menonists hijacking hashtag Redefine Women, which was a follow-up to the Dictionary Gate 2 hashtag Redefine Women, where their hashtag Redefine Women campaign got a load of traction on the same day that I released the Dictionary Gate 2 video, where I point out why it's stupid. But we can't have that on YouTube. Before that, the End of Agi Rise of the Pink Ceiling. Now this is following up on all the other videos which I've done on Agi, most of which are not allowed on YouTube. And that's odd, considering the fact that most of them are only actually looking at medical information around this so-called female Viagra drug, and finding that it was ridiculously ineffective and actually downright dangerous for a lot of women to take, and yet still had full support of a lot of feminist and women's rights organizations. But you can't talk about that on YouTube. Before that, there's a privated video, which was just me recording my chat with Candid CEO Bindu Reddy, which you have never seen and never will. So that one's a moot point. Before that, live stream not allowed, not surprised. Old school 90s gaming misogyny. That's just the retelling of a story from the early 90s where a kid got gypped out of winning a trophy because a bunch of television producers decided that his sister needed to beat him at video games because it would have made better television. But you're not allowed to point that out on YouTube, apparently. We've covered the next two. Before that, Teal Deer After Eating Chipotle, that's just a shitposting video, again, of voicing over some deer footage. Can't do that, apparently. Before that, the hashtag redefine women video. All I do in that video is the same thing that I did in the previous Dictionary Gate video. I simply hold the person making a complaint to their own standard, and it reveals why they're full of shit. But you can't do that, apparently. Oh, sweet irony for the next video. The op-ed YouTube's demonetization, censorship or not. That's a video where I actually point out that YouTube demonetizing people's videos is not silencing anyone, because you can still upload stuff, you still have a voice, you're just not being paid to express your opinion. In a time where a lot of people were railing very hard against YouTube, accusing them of censoring them and generally hating on it, I actually took a defensive position on behalf of YouTube and said, no, they actually have a right to do this. They are a private company. Apparently, I'm not even allowed to defend YouTube, because that one's been removed. But oh boy, am I looking forward to doing a follow-up about all of this demonetization nonsense. That one will probably also not be allowed on YouTube. Before that, monthly livestream, not allowed, not surprised. Before that, the video about genital mutilation. I'm really not surprised about that one, since it's talking about cultural genital mutilation from all around the world, and how it's not really a gendered issue at all. Consensual rape of Jane Doe 2, looking at another false rape allegation. That one's not allowed. Probably because the topic is rape, even though it's false rape allegations, which you'd have thought people would want to know about because it's kind of important, but okay. Before that, a shitposting video about the upcoming race war. I can totally see why that one isn't allowed because it contains the words race war, but it's a sort of satirical look at Black Lives Matter, where I've re-edited a load of news footage to make it look like a bunch of deer are rioting after one deer gets shot by a police officer. Before that, another shitposting video where I voice over a deer. You can't have fun on YouTube, and then a live stream. I'm not surprised about the live stream again. Before that, an interesting one. Progressive Academic Echo Chambers. That video is basically no different from Progressive Academic Echo Chambers 2. That's why they share the same title. It's a video where I go through a study looking at political representation in academia. This one is allowed, but the other one isn't, because reasons, I guess. Before that, grown-up babies, a symptom of a problem, just talking about the growing rates of infantilization of adults in society. Something kind of ironic about that one being hidden by Big Daddy YouTube. Can't have those little kids getting offended now, can you? Before that, live stream, not surprised. The op-ed about academic conservatism and neo-academia, that one is allowed. And there's another little bit of sweet irony in that one, because it talks about the use of the internet to spread ideas as far and widely as possible, and how it's allowed an ever-increasing frequency of fact-checking and ultimately peer review on a global level that we simply didn't have a few decades ago, and how this should have led to a massive improvement in the quality of human knowledge, and yet it hasn't, and has actually led quite a lot of people towards severe forms of academic snobbery, and how it's basically caused people to retreat ever more into academia and hand-wave away anything that comes from outside. Genetic determinism, the evolutionary red herring returns, that one's allowed. It's just talking about why people using the term genetic determinism whenever they're talking about genetic influences on behavior are completely wrong. It's a red herring position. Anyone who works in evolutionary psychology is not a genetic determinist. The PC is on fire with Stardusk. That's a preview video of a hangout on Stardusk's channel where we basically talk about how we don't like political correctness and how it's stifling conversation. Oh, sweet irony, 'cause that ain't allowed on YouTube. Before that, a shitposting video about online Twitter harassment where I pretend to be the victim of myself because it's funny. Can't do that because humor's not allowed. Implicit bias and police racism. That's not allowed on YouTube, because in that video, all I do is point out why the implicit bias test is nonsense. Its reproducibility is very low, its accuracy is highly questionable, and even the creators of the test themselves have said you cannot use it to predict anything. And yet people do all the time. And I then tack on to the end of that a police shooting implicit bias test, where it was found that police are actually less likely to shoot black people than white people, and so if you are someone who believes that implicit bias means anything, then you have got to accept that test as valid. And yet we all know that people like that never will. The next one, a conversation with Psychological Cynic, that one I crossed out by mistake. I was just in the zone of crossing things out. That one was actually fine. Which is kind of weird given the fact that there is a lot of anti-feminism, a lot of anti-social justice in there. Before that, a shitposting op-ed about the Ghostbusters 2016 current year edition. It's basically 10 minutes of silence, so I'm not surprised that one was okay. Another Agi video, not allowed. Now's 2016 Woman of Courage Award, going to a false rape accuser. Can't talk about that on YouTube. A live stream, not surprised, not allowed. A video talking about why Siri is totally sexist. That one is allowed on YouTube, which is weird because it's basically the same as the Alexa videos which we looked at earlier. People complaining about virtual assistants having female voices. One is allowed, the other is not, because reasons. Super Internet Best Friends, that did make it onto YouTube. It's just talking about how you shouldn't assume that content creators are in some way linked to each other or even know each other when they probably don't. Problematic adverts, a video looking at feminists and social justice warriors complaining about adverts with their depictions of women, that's not allowed on YouTube. The Brexit stream which I did with Stardusk, that is allowed on YouTube, and it was just looking at the pros and cons of Brexit. The important post-Brexit message, one of the few shitposting videos on my channel which is allowed to be seen. It's just me saying, bad luck. I don't want to live on this planet too, just looking at some stupid news stories and pointing out that they're stupid. Can't do that. Both of my Brexit by numbers videos are allowed. Now that's kind of weird because all those videos is looking through various legal sources about some of the potential implications of what a Brexit vote would have meant. That's allowed, but reading through feminist academic studies isn't. It's basically the same thing, but just two different subjects. This may be a hint that anti-feminism stuff is actually a target. The rape culture of female-only parking, which looks at feminist hypocrisy around their concept of rape culture and the idea of female-only parking, not allowed on YouTube. Brainlab's gender pay equality video where I bust a company who lied about having a gender pay gap, can't have that on YouTube. A monthly live stream, not surprised. Marketing misogyny, the sale of virtue signaling. That's just talking about the use of virtue signaling in advertisement. The whole, if you don't like this, it's cause you're sexist stuff. Well, you can't have that on YouTube. 50% of online misogyny caused by women. That's a video where I do nothing but read through a study which concluded that 50% of all the online abuse that you see is caused by women. That's not allowed on YouTube for some reason. Closed season round 4. That is a slideshow of fan art. Can't have that on YouTube. Frameworks and ideologies in analyzing data. That's just considering one problem, the wage gap, from multiple different angles. Can't have that on YouTube. Lacey Green doesn't understand false rape accusations. That is a response video where I just use a shitload of crime-related statistics to demonstrate why Lacey Green is full of shit. Can't do that on YouTube, apparently. Before that, a chat which I did with Coltane. Mostly in that video we talk about a bunch of his videos, where he just links a load of things that have happened in society to things like women's suffrage, the advent of the pill, and so on and so forth. For some reason, that conversation isn't allowed on YouTube, but the other one with Psychological Cynic is. Child-free parental leave, me-ternity, wherein I point out that wanting to have a maternity leave without having children is stupid. Can't do that on YouTube. Before that, another consensual rape video talking about a false rape case, can't have that. Another monthly live stream, that doesn't surprise me. Before that, TLDR's Early Years, another video where all I do is voice over a piece of deer footage. But you can't do that for some reason. Before that, a MGTOW Talks video about anti-feminism and beyond. Sounds like very much what it was, and you can't do that on YouTube. Before that, Intellectual Rigor versus Ponage, wherein I point out that mocking people is all fun and good, but it does actually help if you actually have some objective stats to back up your position. Can't mention that on YouTube, though. Before that, little op-ed piece about the suspension of social justice in universities and how suspending these courses isn't going to help. Can't talk about that on YouTube. Another Agi video, this one looking at Valiant Pharmaceuticals and how it mishandled it. Again, you can't talk about this on YouTube because reasons. Open season video, a request for fan art. You can't ask people for fan art on YouTube, it's not allowed. Before that, women on YouTube don't understand YouTube, that's just talking about the experiences of being content creators on YouTube. Yeah, you're not allowed to talk about that on YouTube, apparently. Before that, Cenk Uygur talking about gynocentrism. That was just where he turned a male victim into a female victim in an attempt to make people realize how bad a situation was, and how I just found it funny that that's the technique that people use in order to make people understand that something is bad. But you can't talk about that on YouTube. Before that, monthly live stream, no surprise. Teaching smartphones about rape. Now, I understand why that one wouldn't be there. Again, the topic is rape. But it's talking about the ethical consideration of having smartphones be able to detect things like sentiment when people are doing voice searches. And are companies under some sort of moral obligation to actually do that? Well, you can't talk about that on YouTube. Hashtag vote Trump get dumped. Women withholding sex from their boyfriends if they vote for Donald Trump. You can't talk about that on YouTube. And then a live stream looking at the Brussels terror attack. I can understand that one. 3D genitals don't understand consent. That's just looking at the presumption of male perpetrators in advertisement. Not allowed on YouTube. Another shitposting video where I voice over a deer. No fun allowed. eBay is racist, the science, wherein I look at a study that claims people are racist on eBay because they don't want to buy things from black people, and I demonstrate why that study is full of shit. March livestream, not surprised. Twitter Trust and Safety Council. That's a video where I point out that about half of the Twitter Trust and Safety Council is all reading from the same song sheet, one authored by the European Commission. Can't talk about that on YouTube though. Another Addy video, not allowed because reasons. But then for some bizarre reason, the 5-hour-long research stream that was done for the Twitter Trust and Safety Council video, that is allowed on YouTube. God knows why. Before that, the Coltane Trilogy, some videos which aren't even mine, but just look at some interesting cultural trends. Can't have that. Debunking MTV's revisionist view of history. Can't have that. An impromptu livestream thing that I did, and a shitposting video. Again, why? I don't understand. But they're not allowed. The hilarious Dictionarygate 2.0 The Triggering video. That's a video wherein I hold a special snowflake to his own standard, and he melts. But we can't do that on YouTube. A monthly livestream, again, not really surprised. The BuzzFeed First World Problems video, pointing out that really minor complaints that make you sound like a petulant child aren't a real problem, but we can't do that on YouTube. Before that, another shitposting video where I voice over a piece of deer footage. Fun is not allowed on YouTube! But the No True Scotsman fallacy video is. That is literally just a picture of the No True Scotsman fallacy with a piece of bagpipe music. So a still image with some music playing is allowed in that video, but not on my Triggerween video, which was the same thing. Jacked Up Doesn't Understand Feminism, a look at a load of history around feminism and why someone is wrong. Can't have that on YouTube, and then there's a monthly livestream, which doesn't really surprise me. A video looking at the absolute non-controversy about Hermione Granger being black or white. That is allowed on YouTube for some reason. Livestream, not surprised. An op-ed piece reviewing a movie. You can't do that on YouTube, apparently, for some reason. Decoded doesn't understand all the things, that's just pointing out that MTV's Decoded is full of shit, and again makes use of rather extensive sources to do so, can't do that. A shitposting video celebrating 100k subscribers, can't have that on YouTube because fun is not allowed. JJ Talks doesn't understand biology, wherein I very extensively talk about the biology of humans and how chromosomes work. That's not allowed on YouTube. There's a live stream which isn't allowed. That one I kind of understand. Again, it's a live stream. Using feminists to disprove feminism. That's just me citing feminists that disprove what another feminist says. That's it. But we can't do that on YouTube. A pair of videos looking at the Justice for Jamar and Black Lives Matter stuff. Those aren't allowed on YouTube because you're not allowed to question Black Lives Matter. Little shitposting video that I cut out of a live stream that I was on with Milo Yiannopoulos there. Can't have that on YouTube. A video looking at the Missouri University protests. Well, you can't have that on YouTube. Not really sure why. The collective shout thing about sex toys and hypocrisy, that one I can understand because, again, it's all about sex toys. Livestream doesn't surprise me. Genetic determinism, the evolutionary red herring, that's just me reading a chapter out of a book. Apparently you can do that on YouTube, that's absolutely fine. But then having a video where a woman relentlessly sexually harasses a man on television, you can't have that on YouTube. Of course not. Feminists can't handle tiny words. That's just me pointing out a ridiculous feminist position when she complains about the existence of the word to. Can't have that on YouTube. The Melissa Harris Perry crack about slavery, that was just a stupid statement, and I point out why. Can't have that on YouTube. Lacey Green doesn't understand Halloween, wherein I use a ridiculous number of crime statistics to prove to Lacey Green that Halloween doesn't turn men into rapists. My channel trailer is not allowed on YouTube. It's just an introduction to who I am, what I do, and a little word about financial supporting. But that's not allowed. Your diet is sexist and racist, that's just pointing out a series of news stories all to do with food, and how a bunch of people have decided that food is now sexist or racist, and I point out why they're full of shit. I don't want to live on this planet anymore. That's just again a series of really stupid stories, which I point out why they're stupid. That's not allowed on YouTube. Oh, the video I got raped. Yeah, I know why that one isn't listed. It's because it's got the word raped in the title. The feminist outrage at sex bots. That's just a very lengthy look at the stupidity and double standards and general hypocrisy around people who are offended by sex bots. But since it's to deal with sex, you can't have it on YouTube, that I understand. A couple of short preview videos for live streams that I did with V and the Accent Overlords podcasts. Those aren't allowed because reasons. Haywood doesn't understand feces. Yeah, that was that video where a batshit insane columnist on some newspaper somewhere wrote a lengthy article about how their baby girl took a shit and everyone should be proud of her for it. Can't have that on YouTube. Now this one's interesting, a further look at Agi and Sprout Pharmaceuticals. This is the only Agi video of mine which is allowed, and I have absolutely no idea why, especially since that's the video that uncovers the massive astroturfing campaign from all of the feminist organizations that were involved in it. Before that, another art contest video, can't have that. Oh, the original Agi video, feminists don't understand Agi. All I do is read through all of the medical research to do with that drug and find out that it's complete garbage. But you can't tell people about that on YouTube. Before that, MGTOW Mafia gets owned by his own stupidity. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you're not allowed to have that on YouTube. The open season round 3, that's just the call for fan art. Can't do that. Ah yes, the sound of land whales glorifying obesity. That was just looking at a bunch of photoshopped video game characters and pointing out that it's not appropriate for some characters to be fat given their occupations. But apparently you can't point that out on YouTube. Sexist gamers are losers, the science, wherein I do nothing but go through a social science study which attempts to declare that video gamers are sexist because none of them ever speak in video games. Can't talk about that on YouTube, though. Now, the next one is really curious. Steve Shives still doesn't understand the men's rights movement. That one is not allowed on YouTube. But the previous one, Steve Shives doesn't understand the men's rights movement, that one is allowed. But they're both doing the same basic thing, pointing out Steve Shives' massive misunderstandings of the men's rights movement. And I do that by digging very extensively into various things such as criminal statistics. One is allowed, the other is not, and I cannot fathom why. Before that, there was another preview of a livestream which I did with Stardust where we talk about social constructs and feedback loops. That one is allowed, but all of the other ones aren't for some reason. I don't know why. The Outraged Feminists video, that's where I talk about a male rape charity having its funding slashed down to 0 and feminists are nowhere to be seen, even though patriarchy hurts men too. In fact, the only sources of feminists that I could find talking about it were mocking it, but you can't have that on YouTube. Both of the videos about the male privilege checklist aren't allowed on YouTube. That's a pair of videos where all I do is go through and fact-check a male privilege checklist, and rather unsurprisingly, all of their sources are wrong, inaccurate, or just outright fabrications. But you can't talk about that on YouTube. My video about the social construct fallacy, now that is allowed on YouTube, but that's just a little opinion piece talking about how frustrating it is that some people hand-wave away certain patterns by just saying, oh, it's a social construct, as if that means we can instantaneously change things. But that is allowed. The Donna Doesn't Understand Road Signs video, now that is allowed on YouTube, but that's just a short audio clip of someone talking about how deer need to learn how to read road signs. Bad Mouse Doesn't Understand Teal Deer, a response video where I point out that an anarcho-feminist is full of shit using a ridiculous number of sources. Can't have that on YouTube. A MGTOW United video where I point out that MGTOW United is full of shit. Can't have that on YouTube. Another live stream chat preview video which can't exist. Another shitposting video which can't exist on YouTube because reasons. We've covered the male privilege one and we've covered the Steve Shives one. Chavez doesn't understand hashtag Gamergate. That's just pointing out that a piece of slam poetry was not only bad, but also completely wrong about the social movement Gamergate. But that's not allowed on YouTube. A video about my subs not understanding satire. That was a bunch of people who sent me an article talking about Minecraft, and it was a piece of satire that was labelled as satire. I just thought I'd read it out because it was fun, and then point out to people, look, this is satire, I'm not going to do a serious response to it. But you can't have that on YouTube. Women are equal, so they need special treatment. Looking at various laws being passed which force women into positions that they are not qualified to have when compared to men. Can't have that on YouTube. Another live stream preview, which isn't allowed for some reason. Lacey Green talking about marketing and economics. Can't have that on YouTube because I'm pointing out why she's full of shit by using a ridiculous number of sources. And then one woman discovers why she earned less. That's just me re-editing a BuzzFeed video so it actually makes sense. But that can't be on YouTube because no fun allowed. The pink tax video, wherein I point out that the cost of products is determined by how much people are willing to pay for them. That one is allowed on YouTube for some reason. The sound of crumbling narratives video, that's not allowed on YouTube, and it's just where I point out that a load of assertions that some people have made about certain circumstances didn't happen, or there's too much evidence to the contrary for them to be true. The MGTOW United doesn't understand nature video, which I'm not even sure how I would begin to describe. As someone who has absolutely no understanding about anything, and I just demonstrate why he's completely wrong, but you can't have that on YouTube. Closed season round 2, that's just an art slideshow, but you can't have that on YouTube. Zelda Nez doesn't understand satire. That's where I, at very great length, explain to someone that meninism is a parody of feminism and doesn't actually exist. Laura Bates doesn't understand rape. Again, just a video using a load of statistics to point out why someone's assertions are wrong, but you can't do that on YouTube. Universities don't understand safe spaces, that's just looking at a bunch of universities who are implementing safe spaces, and why I think that's ridiculous, but you can't have that on YouTube, because apparently YouTube has to be a safe space. Open season round 2, now that's the call video for fan art to be given in. That is allowed on YouTube. God knows why. The other open season videos asking for fan art, they're not allowed, but this one is for some bizarre reason. Soundly Awake doesn't understand why he's a feminist, that's just some guy talking about why he's a feminist, and I demonstrate why all of the reasons that he gives are very, very poor. The video addressing Anita Sarkeesian's Sydney Opera House speech, where I point out again why all of her positions are deeply flawed. That goddamn feminism doesn't understand consent video. Oh, Jesus Christ, that was absolutely painful. But since it contains a load of masturbation jokes, I understand why that one's not allowed. A conversation which I had with ex-Paladoc, that's not allowed on YouTube for some reason, so which live stream conversations are allowed on YouTube and which ones aren't seems to be completely random. Some guy doesn't understand why people are feminists, again that's just pointing out why some guy claiming that he's a feminist is kind of based on some very poor reasoning. Not allowed on YouTube. Both of my videos regarding sexy MGTOW aren't allowed on YouTube. One student doesn't understand humans and social interaction. That's just pointing out that the Teach Men Not to Rape initiative is completely and utterly ridiculous. The theme song that a fan sent me because it's hilarious. That's not allowed on YouTube. Anissian doesn't understand feminism. A video where I give Anissian a massive history lesson on feminism and why he doesn't understand what the hell he's talking about. That's not allowed on YouTube. Think Tank doesn't understand statistics and reading, wherein I point out that the study that they are reading from is ridiculously flawed in a massive way, and they are too blind to see it. Open and closed season, the very first fan art competition which I ever ran on this channel, both forbidden. Both of my video responses to Captain Andy not allowed on YouTube. All I'm doing is just pointing out why he is completely and utterly full of shit and doesn't have a clue about the academia that he loves talking about. The video response that I did to Clown Baby, where I basically go through several of the sources that she used and many of the sources that she claims she used but didn't actually, and point out why they are ridiculously flawed. The Pesky Dames video, where I again point out why all of the sources that they're using are ridiculously flawed. A feminist not understanding feminism, again just using a lot of sources to point out why she's wrong. None of these things are allowed on YouTube. The New York Man-Spreading Poster Initiative, that's more of a joke video where I mock up a load of equally stupid posters. Hobbes Justice video, where I point out that Hobbes Justice is full of shit. The Biological Reason for Slut-Shaming video, where I point out numerous biological and psychological adaptations to human mate preference and selection, and how this influences how people may perceive and understand sexual reproduction. Brianna Wu is a victim of hatred. That's just a hilarious video where I point out Brianna Wu is a massive narcissist. None of these videos have been allowed on YouTube. I think it goes without saying that all of the Potty Mouth Princess videos are not available on YouTube, and that's because they contain a shit ton of swearing. And most of these older ones are just the general pretty standard response video kind of things. And rather amusingly, the first video that I ever made is still available. I just point out the hypocrisy of a social justice warrior at the Oculus Connect keynote convention, where she complains about a lack of diversity in VR when her own company is made up exclusively of women, who are all the same ethnicity, and the same age, and able-bodied. Well, that's got that long-ass review out of the way. As I'm sure you can see, there really is very little reason for why some of these videos should be allowed and some shouldn't. Especially given the fact that there are some videos which are remarkably similar to each other, some of which are allowed and then some of which are not. And the most curious example of this to me was those Steve Shives response videos, because both of those were remarkably similar, and they both contained very heavily anti-feminist themes. And by virtue of their nature of pointing out that someone has a massive misunderstanding about the men's rights movement, it could definitely be seen as being a more positive point of view on the men's rights movement. And these are two of the criteria that it is currently rumoured are quite heavily weighted when it comes to determining whether or not something should be visible in the restricted mode or not. So I did a little test. I took the video which was not allowed, I removed all of its tags, and I removed its description, to see if that was the thing that was tripping the YouTube algorithm into saying, hey, you can't see this because it's got something controversial in it. And this led to absolutely no change in visibility. Now obviously this is in no way definitive, it's one data point by itself. Ultimately it's pretty meaningless. But it may very well indicate that there's something to do with the voice recognition in these videos, for the automatically generated subtitles that are catching certain words or certain topics or certain phrases and saying, that makes it too edgy, so we can't have it. And this is where the testing phase comes in. I think it's going to be necessary over the coming weeks and months for people to play around with the metadata of their videos, to play around with the description box, to play around with the tags, to play around with the titles of their videos, and see if that has any effect on what is visible and what is invisible. In fact, thinking about efficient ways of doing this, if someone who was very computer savvy out there was able to code together some sort of information dredger on these videos that could instantly scan through a YouTuber's entire catalogue of videos, list off all of the tags, list off all of the words in the description, all the words in the title, and find out what words there are in those videos which have been banned and which ones have not been banned, and see if there is any similarity between those words, or see if there are certain keywords that show up in the category of banned that don't show up in the category of allowed, or something like that. Even better, if there was a way of going through the automatically generated subtitles and doing something similar, that would be incredibly beneficial, although that may be beyond the realms of possibility. But I really do think that something like that needs to be done, because, let's be honest, YouTube is not going to be transparent about this. They are never going to release any information about the formulas that they're using to do this. So it's down to us to reverse engineer it and figure it out. Anyway, to wrap this fairly long-winded video up, hopefully it's just sparked off some thoughts in your own mind about what kind of content it is that YouTube is trying to get rid of, and what sort of stuff it is that it's trying to make acceptable. And this is going to be one of the few videos that I end, in fact possibly the only video that I end, actually requesting some sort of engagement in the comments section. Because as I said, any progress in understanding how this works is going to have to come from YouTube's users. So any ideas or information that can be gleaned from that is going to be helpful. Especially so if there is someone out there who is tech savvy enough to work out a way of doing what I said earlier and dredging through all of this information in some sort of automated fashion. Anyway, hopefully this was somewhat interesting for you. To me, it's just another data point for a video which I will hopefully get around to making at some point.